And in three, two, one.
You are now listening to the Lapsed Graps podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode 6 of Lapsed Graps, a podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend
Jam, who doesn't?
and we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. Now, before we get into the wrestling of it all, there is some news we want to go over. So it was announced at TakeOver 31 that NXT will be reviving the Havoc brand with a show on Wednesday, October 28th, hosted by Shotzi Blackheart. There's been no real discussion about the card or anything like that. I think it was just something that they had on the IP list, and they were like, "Well, we'll just break this out for the close enough to Halloween show." I do know that Cody Rhodes a while ago did an interview where he was trying to get a lot of his dad's IPs back under the AEW umbrella. So that might be why they chose to break it out after this many years. Because I don't think they ever did a Halloween Havoc after buying WCW, but I wasn't really following super closely in those days. So that might be something that you have a bit more knowledge of. But I'm pretty sure when WCW died, Halloween Havoc kind of went into their just general conglomerate of stuff they own but don't use.
No, I think you're right. I can't remember WWE ever using the name. It's a great name, so I'm surprised why they never used it. But with a lot of WCW pay-per-view names, it just kind of fizzled into the dust when WWE acquired everything. But I am glad that they are like making this like I guess a TV special type deal. Again, even though it is just a TV special, Halloween Havoc is always a cool name to me, and it's got probably one of might be my number one or number two favorite match of all time, Eddie versus Rey Mysterio. Not sure what year that was, but that's
96.
amazing. 96. All right, thank you. You're a lifesaver. 96 was amazing, amazing match. So if we're going to revive that pay-per-view in the same name, I'm all for it.
Well, now that I said that with all of that confidence, I better make sure I'm right. But while I'm looking this up, another thing we wanted to go over is that WrestleMania 31, which was, or is it 31?
The
No,
next one,
that is so wrong. Yeah,
I think it's
WrestleMania
36.
36. Yes, it was TakeOver 31. So WrestleMania
Okay.
36 is which was supposed to be in Los Angeles at their brand new like 100 million, $200 million stadium that they just built for the Rams and the Chargers.
Mhm.
It was supposed to be in Hollywood, was said to be in Hollywood, isn't in Hollywood anymore. It was announced, I believe, on Monday by Sean Ross Sapp at Fightful.com that the WWE was in talks to return WrestleMania to Tampa Bay and had already secured several buildings around the Tampa Bay area for the proposed announced weekend for WrestleMania. Now, as of recording, they are still advertising WrestleMania 36 as WrestleMania Hollywood. So it could be that this was done as a precautionary measure in case something happens to the venue. But you would think with an event as big and as important as WrestleMania, they would have already had that venue booked up for that week, basically, well in advance. So it
Yeah.
opens up a lot of interesting doors because you have obviously the lost revenue due to COVID with Tampa Bay and the amount of tourism revenue that was lost. But then you also have an interesting issue over in Hollywood with the amount of contracts that were probably signed because WrestleMania just coming to your town just destroys everything. Traffic and like increases tenfold. You can't go out to eat anywhere. Everything is crazy. So, they plan a lot of their fiscal years, these cities, around the fact that they're getting a WrestleMania. So it seems a little odd to me that in a very short amount of time, October to April, we've pulled from Hollywood and are putting it back in Tampa, and no one seems to mind.
Yeah, but it's not the biggest surprise to me just because like COVID like canceled WrestleMania in Tampa like what 2, 3 weeks before the show was supposed to happen. So I figured they were going to find some way to try to make back wherever money was lost from the Tampa show. And I'm assuming that maybe that pushes everything back. Like Hollywood was supposed to be next WrestleMania. It might be the next WrestleMania. I don't
Hmm.
know if they booked 37 yet, but the 37 venue maybe have to move up to 38 just to make up for all the COVID losses.
Yeah, and if they have booked 37, I don't believe it's been announced. They're usually pretty good about announcing the next year's venue at that
Mhm.
WrestleMania. So maybe they were able to work out a deal where they were able to push everything. By the way, it was Halloween Havoc 97, not 96. So I'm glad I looked that
That's the
up.
one. That's the
All
one.
right.
But
Speaking of
yeah,
Wrestle,
with
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. So sorry. No,
Oh,
no, no. Go right
I
ahead.
was just gonna ask, like maybe this is kind of like a blessing in disguise. Like if like Lord forbid that COVID pushes anything else back and WrestleMania can go on in Florida. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise because we get that extravagant arena that we were supposed to get this year, and in when's Mania usually March, April, something like that.
Yeah, usually like the first or second weekend of April.
So when March, April comes around, we can finally get that big arena. Maybe we finally get that pirate ship Kyrie Sane was going to be on, even though she's. What is the deal with Kyrie Sane? Is she like retired or?
So she's not retired. Her official position is a WWE advocate in Japan. So
Okay,
she's not working in ring anymore. A lot of people thought that she was going out there to kind of stump on behalf of the company for the proposed WWE NXT Japan that was like looking to happen when they were trying to just buy DDT Pro Wrestling outright and kind of get that set up as their NXT brand. But then obviously DDT and Tokyo Joshi Pro got bought by the same parent company and are kind of doing their own thing now. So that seemed to have stalled those plans. But for right now, she's just a WWE ambassador in Japan, kind of similar to the Great Khali in India, where he has his school. He shows up. The way you made that face makes me think I said the wrong name.
I did not know Kali was an ambassador with WWE either. This is news to me.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So the way you made that face, I was like, "Is Great Khali not the guy that it is?" But it is.
So
Yeah.
it's such a
There's a
random name.
So there are two guys in NXT right now that are tag team wrestlers, being represented by Malcolm Bivens. They haven't been on TV in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure what's going on there, but they came from Kali's school and were kind of vouched for by Kali to get the tryout in NXT and are moving their way through the tag division right now. So that sort of seems to be what the plan would be with Kyrie Sane, assumedly. But speaking of big, extravagant WrestleManias in front of crowds, Florida announced that they will open stadiums to 100% capacity starting soon. So, 4 days ago, at TakeOver 31, WWE started allowing limited fans into NXT shows. So we had like I think 5% of the total, capacity for the Capitol Wrestling Center because they don't do NXT in the Thunderdome anymore was fans of NXT that had paid to get in, which is nothing new. AEW has been running a reduced fan schedule kind of thing in their stadium, the Jacksonville Jaguars stadium, for almost a month now. It is just kind of shocking to me that Florida still maintains and continues to be one of the most heavily affected COVID areas. And the governor's like, yeah, no, we'll open it up to 100% probably in the next couple of weeks. And you got to wonder if the McMahon influence and to an extent the Khan influence in that state is kind of why these things are being pushed.
Yeah, like even like reduced capacity, that was always kind of sketchy to me, but I haven't heard anything like about like new cases from the reduced stuff, and I hear they do the temperature checks and stuff like that, so they at least have that under control with a limited seating arrangement. Doing full capacity sounds like such a bad idea, and I say that not knowing 100% what Florida's numbers are, but like you said, there was a time when it was basically the epicenter of COVID, and like the main numbers I've been paying attention to has been like Michigan, where I'm from, and like we've been doing like just thousands, like few thousands, couple thousands here and there each of every other day, something like that. And if and I'm hearing that's not even like the worst compared to like other states ever since like schools started opening up. So I can only imagine what Florida is looking like. Again, this just made me making an assumption, knowing that it used to
Mhm.
be the epicenter. So if it's still one of the epicenter spots and they're still full on set on doing this 100% capacity thing, I can't see that going well or long if it goes really bad.
Yeah, so the total cases, it looks like, in the state of Florida right now, that have been reported since the start of the pandemic, tops out at 723,000, with almost 15,000 of the 200,000 deaths reported in the US coming from the state of Florida.
Jeez. What about like new
So,
cases, like daily case average?
the daily case average is right now, today they had a new reported cases of 2,582, and that's today, which is up from 4 days ago at 1,415. So in 4 days, they jumped almost 2,000 cases, and they've been holding around that 2 to 3,000 cases a day all through September, basically back towards a spike that occurred on September 1st of 8,000 cases, but they kind of leveled out to 2 or 3,000 cases every day.
Okay, that's more than triple what's like in Michigan right now daily. So that's yeah, this Florida thing's a bad idea.
100%. I'm all
Jeez.
for escapism and getting out of the house and, feeling a sense of normalcy, but not at the expense of people's lives. That's just silly. And that does it for the news for us today. So we are going to jump into SmackDown, which aired last Friday. So the show opens up with Roman Reigns just gaslighting the shit out of Jey Uso, going over what happened at their match. He tells him that he's embarrassing the family and himself, that all Jay cares about is the title, and that makes Roman sad. That all Roman wanted to ever do with his career is to bring his family up to the main event with him, make them all the stars that he knows they can be. The entire time he's talking, Jay is just staring at the title, doesn't like move to look at Roman, doesn't move to look at Paul, is just staring down the title. Roman kind of looks at him, sees that he's staring at the title, and asks if he wants another shot. Jay nods, and so Roman gives him another title shot at Hell in a Cell, which is going to be on October 25th. The caveat that he gives for this match is that it will have dire consequences. They don't expand on that throughout the rest of the show. Commentary doesn't really pick up on that line. It's just sort of thrown out there and left to hang. So we're not really sure what dire consequences means at this point. It was, I mean, Roman and Jay are two very talented guys that are doing a great story right now. I think it's good to continue that feud at Hell in a Cell. The dire consequences line makes me a little concerned because it's a line that you usually do before you're gonna fight someone for their career kind of crap, and I don't want to see them try to make this storyline work because it never does. They fight them for their career. Either the person loses the title or the person loses their career. And then if they're young enough, they come back in 3 to 4 weeks, but they're on a different brand, so it doesn't matter. And they expect us to forget it. I just want this to be a family thing. I want it to be a small story. And I just want to watch these guys beat the hell out of each other. What do you have? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, first off, I agree with everything you said right there. Like a career thing would be kind of bad idea is a strong phrase, but especially this soon in the feud for a second match, that's probably a bad idea. Though when I hear dire consequences, the first thing I think is that it might be inside of the Hell in a Cell, which that too might be too soon for your second match ever to be inside of a Hell in a Cell. But hey, I think they can make it work just because Roman has had a fair share of really good Hell in a Cell matches, and Jay, I'd argue, has had one of the best Hell in a Cell matches. That Usos versus New Day match
Yeah,
was amazing.
that
So
was
if they could
crazy.
work that magic into a one-on-one contest, I think it could work really well. Do you think that dire consequences could mean just inside the Hell in a Cell?
I think it could, but as we go through the week, you're going to see that there are at least two other matches that have the possibility and more than likely are going to end up in the cell. And I don't know that we've had a Hell in the Cell card with 3 cell matches before. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's ever happened. I think it's usually one from each brand, and then that's the end of it. But there are 2 feuds going on right now that I don't know how you finish them without putting them in the cell. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there might have been at least one pay-per-view where they did 3 Hell in a Cells, but everybody complained about it, saying it was overkill, it was
Mm-hmm.
tiring, so WWE may have never done it again. They just kept like 1 Hell in a Cell or 2 Hell in a Cells like every year. So
Mm-hmm.
if they do 3, that's gonna be a little bit much for the audience to that's just because that match is just so grand and high stakes. Having 3 of that is gonna kill the concept and just kill the audience.
Yeah, no, I agree. It kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the main event when you've already seen, at this point, 2 25-minute just Hell in a Cell matches where they're beating the crap out of each other. It's like, how hype can I get if I've been like at a 9 all night? All right. So Kevin Owens shows up on SmackDown because he wants to talk to Alexa face to face on the KO show. Alexa is really standoffish throughout the entire interview until Kevin kind of drops the line that she's been brainwashed. At that point, she just like smiles real big and gets real excited and like really, really happy. And she agrees that she's been brainwashed, that all of the lies that were in her head have been kind of washed away by the fiend and by the power of the fiend. Kevin asks if the fiend is like with her always, and she agrees. And then he asks if the fiend is like there right now, and she says that the fiend is all around her and all around all of us. Around that time, the lights go out and come back red, at which point the fiend is in the ring with Alexa. And he takes her by the hand, and they like very like casually and gently like walk out of the ring together. Uh, it's really cool. I'm really glad that they're letting uh, Bray kind of play with your perceptions of what should be doable on a wrestling show. Because if you had told me, a year ago that we were going to have a storyline where there was a guy who is basically Pennywise, but creepier, you know, taking over and controlling people's minds, and we wouldn't like sigh and roll our eyes every time he showed up on screen, but we would get really excited to see who he was going to mess with next and what he was going to do next. I would have not believed you because we're so used to WWE kind of ham fisting these stories, even back to the original Bray storyline where he and his family brought Daniel Bryan into the fold for all of like a week before he turned on them and beat them all down single-handedly. They're really letting this one breathe and letting this one build, and I'm so excited to watch where this goes.
Okay, I'm glad they're kind of like easing into the storyline because it seems like they've been going on it for at least a month now. It's like a very slow build. WWE isn't really known for their slow builds, not like they used to. So the fact that they're taking their sweet time with this one, it's refreshing. I'm glad they're going that way. Let's backtrack for a second because I heard you say Kevin Owens on SmackDown and I didn't think anything of it. But then the more I process that, I'm like, when did Kevin Owens go on SmackDown? Like I thought he's been a Raw guy this whole time.
He is a Raw guy. He just showed up on SmackDown, I guess, as part of their wild card rule to talk to Alexa on the KO show, which a lot of people are thinking is kind of getting him reacclimated with the SmackDown audience ahead of the draft, which starts tomorrow night. So that would be what I would guess to be one of the earlier picks, is that Kevin Owens will end up on SmackDown so that he can kind of go face to face with the Fiend and try to rescue Alexa. Because as much as Alexa and the Fiend have this incredible chemistry on screen, Kevin just exudes this like worried friend who, there's no like weird tension at all. There's no like hint of any kind of like romantic tension. It's just, hey, you're my buddy and you're being controlled by a demon clown, and that's weird. So are you okay? Like, is everything good? And that's like Kevin Owens surprisingly seems to be the most wholesome like person on either roster right now, just watching out for his buddy Alexa and trying to keep her safe. So I think that's where they're going to go with it, is that Owens will end up on SmackDown.
Okay, I forgot about the wild card rule, but I'm glad they're at least sticking to that at least. Though I also like that dynamic that they're doing. Like it sounds very, like you said, wholesome and just simple. Like you don't need like complex storylines of like whether it be romance or deeper feelings and that. Sometimes you just need a simple storyline of, hey, my friend's doing some weird stuff. I'm confronting them as a friend to see if they're okay, and their boyfriend puppet master guy thing just beats me up. I think that's kind of that sets up like a really good storyline, especially if they move Kevin Owens to SmackDown. Which,
Hmm.
if we get like a Kevin Owens Bray Wyatt feud, which if we have, then I stand corrected. But I don't think we've ever had before, and I think that would be something really great and really fresh just to see these two tanks just collide with each other.
100%. And I know for sure we haven't had Kevin Owens feud with the Fiend like directly yet. I don't know for certain that he hasn't ever worked with Bray. I'm sure he has. They've both been in the WWE for a good bit of time at this point, which is still weird to say about Kevin Owens that he's been in the WWE for, a long time. But yeah, no, I'm very excited to see where this goes. I hope they don't just like rush through it and blow it all at once, but it seems like they've got three people that are really happy to kind of explore the weirder sides of wrestling and find out what they can get away with, and they're just letting them run with it at least a segment every night. And I for one am super happy. So the last thing we want to talk about with SmackDown is that Sasha Banks and Bailey, which they've been just barely missing each other for the last month or so, have a SmackDown Women's Title match set for next week, like 2 weeks ahead of the pay-per-view. Just a SmackDown Women's Title match.
Hmm.
I don't know why they're burning this on a TV match. I don't know. There's nothing that like SmackDown is being programmed against that I can see. I mean, maybe one of the World Series games, but this seems like a really big match to just blow on TV just to lose a little bit less to a World Series game. Why not? I mean, you've got Hell in a Cell at the end of the month. Why not just save it for Hell in a Cell? You've kept them apart effectively for 3, 4 weeks at this point. Just do it for another 2, 3 weeks and then call it done. But that's just my opinion. What do you think about this one, Jim?
I agree with that opinion, though I'll even go a step further and say like Hell in a Cell might be too soon. Like I've said before, I'll say it again, like saving that feud, saving that match for Mania would give you a really good payoff, but to blow off on SmackDown of all places, or even just have the first match on SmackDown at the very least, that sounds very there's something off about that, and I can't help but feel like there's gonna be some kind of shenanigans at play. Rather it be they fight and they never finishes, it goes to no contest or something,
Hmm.
or Bailey just beats the crap out of Sasha Banks and puts her on the shelf again. I can't see them wrapping it up tomorrow. It's something seems off about this, so just something to keep eyes on, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely feels too quick, but that's also part of wrestling that I really don't like is when I can see a match and like, no, they're not going to give us a finish here.
Mhm.
They're going to do something stupid that, keeps the finish from happening. And then we're going to be here for another 4 or 5 weeks. Like, I want to be able to say, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's coming. And this one just seems really, really telegraphed to me, at least.
Yeah, I'd like to give WWE the benefit of the doubt, and they I hope they know they've got money on their hands, and they're not just willing to just throw away money on a free match like that.
Hmm.
But it's something we'll see tomorrow, or you'll see tomorrow, and I probably won't see, but you'll see.
Yeah, and that's the match I was talking about that I would hope is going to end up in a cell at Hell in a Cell.
Hmm.
Because we've had one women's Hell in a Cell match so far that Sasha was a part of, and it was really, really good. And I think, barring allowing them to do another 60-minute Iron Woman match a la Brooklyn 1, this is the next best way to like allow them to really showcase their incredible chemistry with each other in the ring.
Absolutely. Also, I just realized we keep saying tomorrow, but we drop the podcast on tomorrow. So I guess listeners will hear this, and you're probably listening to this podcast as you're watching Sasha Banks versus Bailey. So we could be proven wrong, may not. We'll see.
We'll find out with all of you. All right. So over to Sunday night's TakeOver 31 that had like 2 weeks of build and was a much better show than it had any right to be. It was 5 matches, like 2.5 hours. It didn't even really feel like I was watching a WWE pay-per-view. I loved it. We're just going to run through the full results real quick. We had Damian Priest retaining the North American title against Johnny Gargano. We had Kushida submitting the Velveteen Dream. We later find out, like the next morning, that Velveteen Dream has a broken wrist via that submission. It's not clear if it's a kayfabe broken wrist, but he does come out on NXT in a couple of days with a cast on, so it might have actually been broken. At which point, claps to Kushida.
I was gonna say, can we like have a moment of like applause for a
Oh,
second?
absolutely. Like, if you're in a position where you're not going to get fired for hurting someone who is allegedly a pedophile, hurt the pedophile.
Absolutely. And
100%.
put all the gold on Kushida for breaking it, kayfabe or real life. Which I'm not one to wish injuries on anybody allegedly, but if that alleged person happens to be a pedophile, then hey, break both wrists for all I care.
100%. I'm glad we're on the same plane with this, and it was
Mhm.
really interesting watching the like disparity between Twitter when the Dream was having his wrist broken and like commentary, because commentary very clearly was told like Dream is the baby face, put over how much pain Dream is in and like how heroic Dream is being for like fighting through this, and my entire timeline was like, break that wrist, boy, break his fucking wrist. And I was like, yeah, no, this is where it needs to be. So it's hilarious because they're continuing to try and push Kushida as this awful, horrible heel who doesn't care about people's safety, and we're all just really excited to watch him hurt people. It's just so much fun. So back to those results, we had Santos Escobar retaining his NXT Cruiserweight title against Swerve Scott. This was a really fantastic match. It went like 22, 23 minutes. I mean, there's nothing really that sticks in my mind about it, like no specific spot that made me go, okay, now it's a great match. It just was two of arguably the better workers in the world right now, just going out and having fun, and they have such good chemistry that I want to watch these guys wrestle forever. You also had Io Shirai retaining the NXT Women's title against Candice LeRae. This was also a good match. It was much closer to like indie Candice than we've had in like the last year and a half since she showed up on NXT. She's always felt a little watered down to me in NXT, mostly because she's not able to wrestle men, and that's where she got her like name and her fame is by wrestling really big, like popular guys on the indie scene and holding dominant in those matches. But Io Shirai is such a dominant women's champion that she's able to work a bit more of a snug, strong style that she's used to working with the men on the indie scene, and it comes across as believable and not just like people working differing styles. So it was really good as well. And then in the main event, we had Finn Balor retaining the NXT title against Kyle O'Reilly, which we are going to discuss just a little bit more on not Monday but yesterday. So Wednesday at like 2 in the afternoon my time, Finn Balor tweeted out that he had broken his jaw in two places during that match. So we are still dealing with just awful, horrible luck on the part of NXT champions. Going back to TakeOver 30, you had Karrion Kross defeating Keith Lee in a really bad match, but we found out it was a bad match because he tore his shoulder like immediately and had to relinquish the title. And now Finn Balor's got a broken jaw in two places. I don't think he ended up relinquishing the title, but I will double check that.
First off, it sounds like the card sounds really good. A lot of those matches I didn't know about. Like I didn't know about Escobar versus Swerve, which Escobar, from what low I've seen of him, I've only seen really his stuff from that tournament they had during the summer. But great guy, shades of a great character with potential. Swerve, I've always argued to be one of the most charismatic wrestlers on the planet, so it's no surprise to me that those two really hit magic. I am kind of concerned about Candice LeRae a little bit. Like, I'm glad that she's showing shades of her indie character a little bit more, because I 100% agree with you, because she hasn't showcased that fighting spirit against men. People haven't really seen, like, the same type of stuff that made us all fall in love with her on the indies. What I am concerned about with is that it seems like she's gotten like multiple shots at the title and like multiple big takeover matches, and it seems like she keeps losing. So you can only lose so many times before your credibility is shattered. So it's the more I'm thinking about it, it seems like she may be the person you'd want to call up. Like if you're not going to put a towel on her or give her a really big push in NXT, move her to Raw, move her to SmackDown, do something different, do something big with her.
Yeah, she was one that I kind of hoped up with Retribution when they made the jump over to the main roster, and it was kind of proven that they were going to end up being like PC people because she seems to have that perfect like Retribution ready-made story just from her life. Because Johnny Gargano, her husband, comes into NXT with his best friend Tommaso Ciampa. They have a less than impressive run as a tag team. They end up winning the title. They become super popular. He has all these incredible matches. He's known as Mr. Takeover now. He is like easily one of like the top 10 most successful and most popular uh not even NXT champions, but NXT superstars of all time. And if you argue that, you're just wrong. And then she comes in, she's got all this hype behind her from the indies, and she's not really done anything. So it sort of seemed like a made ready storyline for Retribution that they just didn't pull the trigger on for whatever reason. So I am seeing here that the reason I didn't remember if Finn Balor relinquished his title on NXT is because he didn't. He's still holding the title. He's just going to be out for a while with healing the broken jaw, which makes sense that they wouldn't want to go like, hey, you know how you just won this title that was relinquished due to an injury? Now you're injured and you have to relinquish the title. It makes sense why they're just kind of letting him stay off TV and keep the title while he heals up.
Yeah, hopefully that means it's not like a super serious injury and like he's back by the next takeover, which I think you said is the 25th, or am I thinking of Hell in a Cell?
Hell in a Cell is the
Okay.
25th. They haven't announced another takeover. And I don't think, since we got two takeovers so close together, I don't think we'll have another one probably until after the first of the year. But, with me saying that, we'll have an announcement of a takeover in like 7 days by tomorrow's SmackDown. So to end the show, Ridge Holland shows up at ringside with Adam Cole's limp body. Ridge is a guy from the UK that's been over in NXT for about 2 years. Really big, striking dude. I had no idea who he was really when he showed up on Takeover. I had to wait for commentary to let me know, just because he. It's not that his look is so different. It's just he's not been used right now, and NXT is such a spoil of riches right now that if you're not used every week, I don't have the mental bandwidth to keep you in my head. So he shows up with Adam Cole's limp body behind the barricade. He throws it over the barricade, at which point all of the Undisputed Era kind of runs down and checks on him. When the camera pans back up to like see if Ridge is still standing there, he's gone. So they haven't really explained what's going on with that storyline, but it looks like uh, at least somebody out there has an issue with the Undisputed Era and is having people kind of dismantle them on their behalf. Or maybe it's just Ridge and he wants to take them one-on-one. It's not super clear.
Okay. Is Ridge like a big, like, built monster heel type of guy? Or is he just a guy?
He's a big dude. The best way I can put it is he's a British Dijak, at least
Mm.
in look, where he's got muscles on his muscles and is just stupid huge. Uh, as far as him being a heel, I don't know that I would say he's a heel due to him attacking Adam Cole, just because Adam Cole is like the heel of all heels in NXT right now. So it could be that he's a babyface and maybe getting paid by Finn Balor or somebody. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a little strange, but NXT has a lot longer of a rope on stories than Raw or SmackDown does with me at the moment. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
willing to let that kind of play out.
yeah, it's from the way I'm trying to picture in my head at least, it seems like Rich is gonna be like the guy to like replace what Karrion Kross was supposed to be as far as that big monster heel that's
Hmm.
unstoppable and like basically we might as well say just debuting because, like I said, if they've never really used him before, might as well just say this is like a debut or re-debut by debuting as the guy to take out Adam Cole of all people, longest reigning NXT champion. That immediately makes a statement. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him next, as far as just how they build him up as a threat beyond just taking out four scrawny guys one by one. Assuming that it might be Undisputed Era, all he might have a beef with all of Undisputed Era opposed to just Adam Cole.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the promo material for TakeOver 31, we were promised two returning champions. We got their names at the TakeOver. The returning champions are former NXT UK Women's Champion Toni Storm, who is officially making the full-time jump over to NXT. When Rhea Ripley lost her title to Toni Storm really early on in the run of NXT UK, Rhea made the jump over to NXT, and Toni kind of held that division down over there for a while until people like Kaylee Ray and Viper Piper Nevin and oh goodness, all of our UK fans, all two of them are screaming names at me right now. But anyway, once they could get like the women in that division kind of established and set up and ready to run, so Toni was sort of the Pete Dunne of that division for a while, just holding that down. But now that they've got a whole other set of people over there, she's able to come on over. And then speaking of women holding down the division, Ember Moon is returning to NXT as well, and she looks great. So she's been out for damn near a year at this point with an injury, and at one point actually came back to her hometown, which is my hometown, to start a wrestling school with her fiance. And it looked like was maybe done with WWE, but still had all her active socials, was still showing up on Xavier Woods' Up, Up, Down, Down. So people were really hopeful, but we hadn't really gotten any kind of injury updates. And then all of a sudden, she just pops up and she looks great. She looks like she hasn't lost a step. I mean, I am so excited for uh, Ember to just come in and kind of destroy the women's division, because my NXT time really started around the Royal Rumble, where she wrestled Asuka for the title at TakeOver and then showed up in the Royal Rumble and wrestled for 30 minutes with like her shoulder all taped up and just banged up. That's where my kind of like, oh, I need to watch this program every week with NXT got started. And I think that's where a lot of people's like, okay, this is no longer something that I can catch when I have time. Like I have to tune in kind of got started. So I missed a lot of her like and Asuka's collision and early run against one another. So I'm excited to see her just kind of come in back where she's comfortable, back in her element, and just run with it.
Okay, so with Toni Storm, I'm glad to see her back. She was always someone who was a great in-ring wrestler, even better in-ring personality and character. She did great stuff on the Indies in Japan, and she was on the cusp of doing great NXT UK work, though like none of her matches really stood out in a memorable way. At least I can't remember anything that like stands out at the top of my head. But her moving to the US version of NXT, that kind of showed some promise of, oh, she's gonna have fresher feuds, fresher opponents, stuff like that. But the injury that she had like right when she got called up to US NXT, that kind of stalled things. So hopefully she gets to pick up where she was trying to go at the start of the year. Ember Moon, that is huge. She's 100% one of the better wrestlers on the WWE roster. Fantastic, just fantastic look and presence to her as well. And I was bummed out to hear that she was injured, but after like what feels like maybe a year longer than that, to hear that she's finally back and back on her roots in NXT, that's kind of perfect because I always felt like her run in NXT was kind of, what's the word? For lack of a better word, stalled a little bit because she had all the tools to be the makings of a great main eventer, but there were always other pieces ahead of her that WWE would rather use. Like she came right in the middle of Asuka's reign, so she couldn't beat Asuka. Then Asuka leaves, she gets the vacant belt, but 2 months after getting the vacant belt, she loses it to Shayna Baszler. So she never really had a chance to really get a true main event run. But this is like kind of like her second chance to pick up the pieces where she left off, and hopefully be at the top of the ladder where she should have been, if not for other pieces in front of her 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like she's in the position that Asuka was in when she came in now, where she is this established person. She has all of these incredible matches in her rearview mirror to kind of back up the fact that, like, no, I get a title shot. I don't care that I've been gone for a year. My name is Ember Moon. I get a title shot. Step up, please. Let's go. And I cannot wait because Ember Moon and Io Shirai are going to tear the damn house down. It's going to be insane. I hope to God that by some miracle, Hell in a Cell ends up being like a triple promoted pay per view and we get the NXT women's title in Hell in a Cell. Because can you imagine Ember Moon and Io Shirai just like chasing each other around the like ring and doing all the crazy crap that we know they can do in that structure? I mean, it's going to look like an episode of Naruto with them just jumping around from wall to wall to wall trying to get the upper hand on each other, and I can't wait, and I'm excited now, and it hasn't been announced.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's a whole lot of exciting feuds for Ember Moon down there just because she's kind of going where like the whole landscape of the NXT women's division is different from where it was 2, 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got completely new opponents. She's never faced a Candice LeRae. She's never faced an Io Shirai, Rhea Ripley.
Oh
Who
God,
else?
Rhea Ripley
Shotzi
versus
Blackheart.
Rhea Ripley and Ember Moon are gonna destroy each other, and then Shotzi too. Oh man, you just blew my mind. I need War Games to be tomorrow.
Whole lot of
Holy
possibilities.
cow! Oh my, I didn't even think about people that aren't like currently in the main event through no fault of their own, just because like NXT is very quickly establishing themselves as a contender for Impact's claim of the last year as the most stacked women's division in wrestling because they're just pulling all the pieces that aren't quite fitting in different spots and be like, no, just go be incredible over there. It's fine. Like just do crazy stuff week in and week out. It's fine. No worries. I can't wait. I can't wait. It's gonna be so good. So over to Raw, we've got Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton are kind of doing their whole thing. They're still feuding. I thought the feud was going to be over in an ambulance match. Apparently, it's not. They're also being booked for Hell in a Cell. This one, I think, has to be in a cell because it is the WWE title. They've main evented what 2 pay-per-views now. It's gotta be. Otherwise, why are you putting it on the card? It's gotta be in a cell. You gotta think that Jay and Roman is in a cell, and then you would hope that Bailey and Sasha's in a cell. But then that runs into the issue of you got 3 cell matches, which matches don't earn a cell, and there are a lot of really interesting feuds going on right now. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to talk about on that one. Just Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton are gonna punch each other in the face again at Hell in a Cell. Yay.
Yeah, seems like they've gone that well like so many times. Like on one hand, maybe it's a good sign just because it shows how invested WWE is in pushing Drew as their go-to main eventer. Because if this, I can't see Randy Orton winning in a Hell in a Cell match, so that would mean that Drew would beat a future Hall of Famer in 3 straight pay-per-views, which would be big for him, especially this long into his reign since what April, whenever Mania was. So
Mm-hmm.
like there is a bright side to, I guess, the idea of the feud, but it seems I can't imagine, especially with their styles, I can't imagine what else they could do in the ring that they haven't already since SummerSlam.
Yeah, the only thing that makes me think that they might have Randy beat him is that it's looking like Hell in a Cell is going to be at 100% capacity for fans because it is going to be in Florida. Because, of course, it is, because at least the rest of the country isn't allowing these kinds of things to go on, which makes me think they're going to make him drop it at that pay per view just because they want to have that pop from the fans and that disbelief, and they want to play with your emotions in that way. Uh, I don't know. It's weird. I'm over it. I wish I wasn't over it because I genuinely enjoy both these guys and they've got good chemistry. It's just they keep doing the same crap every week, and I can't be bothered at this point.
But well, now that you mention the fans, like that's an even bigger reason why I think that they're not, or at least shouldn't have Drew lose it, Because like we've been saying since he won the title that it would be great to see Drew with a full arena of fans chanting and cheering him on like we wanted to see at WrestleMania, him getting towel engulfed in cheers, but for obvious reasons we never got that. If Florida has to do their Florida thing and have a 100% capacity fans, then at least give Drew some time to just enjoy the cheers around him when he's just been walking into an empty arena for the last 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, now an interesting thing to consider is that if Randy beats Drew for the world title, he'll have 15 title reigns, which will put him one
Mm.
behind Ric Flair, still very actively wrestling, and I believe one behind, or will have him tied with John Cena, who we all kind of thought would be the one to usurp Ric Flair's record. But let me double check that real fast.
Okay. While you double check that, if that is correct, then like I can't see the point in giving Randy another title just because like it's not like his character really needs to like he's not the type of character to kind of glow about having 15 towels or even the type to really care about having 15
Mm-hmm.
towels. He always struck me as like a viper psycho serial killer type of character who's just there to just take you out when you least expect it, just feeding on inflicting violence. So I put giving him a 15 towel does nothing, at least for me, and I imagine it doesn't do anything for a lot of people. So it would just be doing so at the expense of Drew's reign, especially, would be kind of pointless to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree. By the way, John Cena is tied with Ric Flair at 16 world titles apiece before his retirement. So it would bring him well within striking distance of that record. I agree that I can't really see it happening, and at least in the way of the character, he doesn't care. But you got to think somewhere inside, like the guy cares about his record. Otherwise, why would he, keep being around? Like the dude's made his money. If he didn't care about his record, if he didn't care about the history of pro wrestling, he just wouldn't be there and they wouldn't allow him to be there. So you got to think he cares in some way. But I agree. I think making Randy the one to break his record, even though he would be doing it legitimately, unlike Rick's daughter, who holds the title for 20 minutes, drops it, and then holds it again, and they count it as two separate reigns, uh, is would still be odd. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I feel like him as just a person, guy in real life, I'm sure he cares about 15, 16 reigns. Like to be a wrestler in the business and not care about getting 15, 16 reigns, like
Even to be
you'd kind of
raised
be.
in the business. I mean, he's Bob Orton's kid, like here for some of Ric Flair's like legendary NWA title defenses. Like he of any of the guys currently on the roster, I think he would have, aside from Charlotte, the most intimate understanding of what Rick's record means because Bob Orton and Rick were on the same cards when he was an 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Were on the same cards when he was in WCW. I think Bob was out of wrestling by the time he came over to the WWF, WWE, and started racking up world title reigns there. But I mean, Randy more so than anybody really has been there, step for step through Rick's whole career and his whole history as a world champion.
Absolutely. And like I'm sure that he does care. You'd be nuts to be have wrestling be your bread and butter and not care about how many championships you have. But as far as the character itself, it never struck me as a character who would care about tower reigns. The Viper to me just cares about inflicting violence. So I'm not sure what another tower reign would do for him. I say nay, but yeah, I don't write for WWE, so who knows what will happen.
Yeah, no, on that point, I 100% agree. So, continuing on with Raw, it looks like Dominic Mysterio and Humberto Carrillo are going to start working as a tag team. Good. It gets
Hmm.
him out of this like weird circular feud with Seth and Murphy. Ideally, Humberto and Dominic seem like they have very similar styles. Humberto, even though they're in similar age groups, very much his senior as far as in-ring experience goes. So he's going to be able to kind of hide some of those rusty moments that still through on Dominic matches and allow him to coast on his name for a little bit until he gets a little bit more confident and is able to go off on his own. I'm all for this. I hope they don't give them the title right away, just because I don't think those guys have been together long enough, and I don't think Dominic has enough experience in the ring to pull off a tag team title reign, even in a brand like Raw that doesn't really give a shit about tag teams. But that's what I'm feeling about that. What do you think?
I think that's a very interesting pairing, not one that I would immediately like. If you ask me who I want to see Dominic Mysterio tag team with, Humberto wouldn't pop into my head, but it makes perfect sense, like especially story. I've never seen Dominic wrestle yet, so I can't speak to them having similar styles. But with Humberto being a guy who's had Rey Mysterio's back since when he got called up to Raw, it makes sense for him to have his son's back as well. So I think that's an interesting pairing, and I'm not sure how long Humberto himself has been wrestling, but his move set is so crisp to the point that I wouldn't be surprised if he's been going at it for like 10 years already. So you've got someone who's very experienced and apparently has a very similar style to Dominic. I think he could learn a lot from that pairing in and out of the ring. So it's a win-win for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, the thing about Mysterio's style, he is a Mysterio. He's got that style, but the way he uses it and the way he incorporates it makes it seem like he'd be much more comfortable in like an MLW sort of promotion than he would be on Raw, just because it is much smaller. The crowds are smaller and they're a bit more forgiving on like screw ups in that way. But I mean, that's just how that goes, I guess, when you have a famous dad. So continuing with Raw, we had Keith Lee and Braun Strowman face off, which should have been an incredible match, but it ended in a countout.
Uh,
They've really got to stop booking guys in matches where neither of them benefits from a win or a loss. I mean, we've had Keith Lee up on Raw for about a month now, and I don't know that he's had a clean finish since his debut. It makes Keith look like a loser. It doesn't help Ron any. It was weird and it was bad.
Yeah, it's weird. It feels like there been a lot of times where we've come in here, you told me about Keith Lee match, and you told me that somehow it's ended in a double DQ or a double count out or something like that. And for them to go that well again with a match between him and Braun Strowman of all things, a match that people were going bananas about during the Survivor Series build and the Royal Rumble stare down, there was already enough stock in that to tease it for a pay-per-view match if they wanted to, or even just a main event TV spot if they wanted to. But to just throw away on just a no contest, it sounds like it takes the steam out of whatever excitement fans have for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So back over to Humberto Carrillo for just a second. He debuted in 2012 in Monterrey, Mexico. So he's only been a professional wrestler for 8 years. It's wild how crisp he looks after only really 8 years in the business, and realistically only 2 years wrestling without the mask, because he was under the mask as Ultimo Ninja from 2012 to 2018 in CMLL and AAA, and had actually started working with MLW when he decided to go ahead and break that contract with MLW and make that jump over to NXT, and then
I didn't know any of
eventually
that.
Monday Night Raw. Yeah, so he's really only been in the business for like 8 total years, but the dude again looks like he's been working for the better part of a decade or maybe longer. So, credit to those guys. There's something they're doing down there in those training schools that just makes everyone look phenomenal. All right, so we go on to another Murphy spot in Monday Night Raw. This one wasn't bad, at least. Murphy is kind of being told that he has to apologize to Seth Rollins for the way everything's gone down over the last few weeks and making Seth look foolish. Murphy refuses because, of course, he does, and attacks Rollins, and he's actually got the upper hand on him for a while, and is trying to force him to apologize to his emotional support girlfriend, but maybe not girlfriend, but probably girlfriend Aaliyah, for leaking their texts and putting her out there in front of everybody and everything like that. Seth kind of plays the victim and starts to apologize, and then flips the momentum and like gouges Murphy's eye. That's really the end of that. It was all backstage. They don't ever really bring it up again. It was really weird and disjointed. It was a cool bit of storytelling. It wasn't needed, I don't think. And the whole Murphy storyline with Aaliyah still feels weird to me with everything they've got going on behind the scenes with the, speaking out, Me Too, and then the whole Velveteen Dream of it all. So I don't know. I would just kind of rather the Murphy Aaliyah thing get dropped and never brought up again, but they seem hell bent to run with it. What do you think, bud?
Well, first off, I agree with you. Like the whole, it's for one thing very ill-timed storyline. Like we talked about this last week, an ill-timed storyline. Even if it wasn't a 30-year-old guy with barely legal teenager, it's just weird. It's not a good look with or without speaking out being relevant. But like, it's one. I was gonna say that it sounds like they're getting away or like easing back from the Aaliyah storyline a little bit and making it more between Buddy Murphy and Seth Rollins just having a beef and this just being a launching pad. Am I wrong in thinking that? Because that's how I'm hearing it.
You're not wrong, but I do think you're giving WWE too much credit. They're definitely kind of shifting away from it very slowly and giving Murphy and Aaliyah much less screen time than they have in recent weeks. I don't think that's because they've reacted to fan backlash to the story. I think it's just because Aaliyah's not very comfortable in front of a camera. And so they're just kind of like, oh, this was a failed experiment, moving on. I would hope that they're moving away from it. It doesn't really feel like they are in the end, though. My only thing, and I really hope that they don't end up doing this, especially with everything that's gone on over the last year, is it's really starting to feel like they're going to set it up to be a, haha, we got you. I was never into you at all, silly girl. You've betrayed your family. Mwahahaha kind of crap. And I really hope that, there's someone in that office that is at least sort of conscious of what's been going on and the perception of the WWE right now to kind of say, hey, maybe this isn't the way we should do this. But it's really starting to feel like that's where it's going. Because I don't know any situation, pro wrestling or not, where you're going to keep getting beat down and keep getting belittled like this and then just keep showing up. The guy's not signing your checks. The company is. You're not winning matches by being with him. So I don't see where the benefit in storyline is for Murphy to keep, being at the beck and call of Seth when he's treating him this way, unless it has all been a work with the Aaliyah storyline, at which point, just why put us through all this crap?
Yeah, like I 100% agree with you. Like to put all this effort into it and then just have it. First off, I never like when WWE does storylines like this. It goes back to the whole "it was me, Austin, it was me all along" thing, which great moment right there. But if you look at the build up to that and you look at the whole Vince McMahon pleading to Stone Cold Steve Austin to save his daughter from Undertaker thing, and then just find out Vince McMahon was just messing with Stone Cold for like 2-3 months straight for no reason at all, it just you feel like your time was wasted as a viewer. And I'm getting that type of idea with Buddy versus Seth right now, especially since like it was a couple episodes ago I even said that if they keep teasing this and just have Buddy Murphy keep teaming with Seth out of loyalty, you're gonna not care about the eventual split. You're not even going to believe the eventual split if you keep teasing the split or breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. And if you do that too many times and then you finally pull the trigger, no one's gonna care, and the storyline, maybe even the match, is gonna fall flat.
Yeah, definitely agreed on that one. So the last thing we want to talk about from Raw is we got more Retribution storyline, but it was actually a really good storyline. I'm actually really excited about Retribution after Monday night, which I did not expect myself saying when we filmed last week. So we found out who the mastermind of Retribution is, and before I tell you, I want to see if you can just guess from the context clues that have been provided of 5 weeks of lapsed graps and hearing my half-assed renditions of the shows. Who's the leader of Retribution?
Okay. Well, the fact that you mentioned 5 episodes of Lapsed Graps makes me think five times, five times, five times. So I'm just gonna say Booker T for no reason at all.
Now I want
WWE.
that, but no, that's not right. It's Ali, the SmackDown hacker.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was actually really excited about this because it
huh.
ties back into the hacker thing. It ties in to his early run in 205 Live, where his whole thing was, I'm in a brand of small guys, but I'm the smallest guy, and I'm good, and I'm happy, and you all love me, but backstage just won't give me a shot and all this stuff. So it's really cool long-term storyline telling. If that's what was intended, probably not because it's WWE. But if it was, that's really cool and a really great way to do this. So yeah, he is in a one-on-one match with someone from the Hurt Business. I believe it was MVP of the Hurt Business, just like saying, you know what, enough's enough. We're gonna get in the ring. We're gonna settle this. MVP is like toying with him, and he just calls in his friends. We expect to see Ricochet. Turns out all of Retribution comes down and just beats the snot out of MVP. It was a really cool way to get this set up. The like last shot of Raw was Ali kind of standing in front of Retribution as they're like backed up with him, like in the ring with a little bit of a smirk on his face. It's like someone in the office was watching early AEW before they fixed the Dark Order when they were just doing everything wrong with them and said, we can fix this. And now they're doing it like a year later. I really love this. I hope that Ali being the leader kind of puts him almost in a Mr. Brody kind of spot where by virtue of having all these admittedly incredible talents kind of at his beck and call, he's able to do really, really fantastic things and get that push on the Raw brand that he hadn't had initially. It does make me a little nervous because the Retribution stable as a whole was kind of split among the like draft eligible superstars. So it's not Retribution, it's like Slapjack and T-Bar and so and so are all kind of in there as individuals. So I hope that they're not immediately going to draft them all to different brands. I don't think they'd be that stupid, but it is WWE, so we don't actually know.
Yeah, though, like on the brand thing, like I feel like they could maybe make it work because assuming there was a lot of guys in Retribution, let's say that they basically split them off basically. So now you got half of Retribution causing chaos on Raw, half of Retribution causing chaos on SmackDown. Maybe it could work. What do you think?
I mean, in theory, it could work, but also in theory, NWO Hollywood and NWO Wolfpack should have worked. And it
Yeah, that's a good
didn't.
point.
And I think that's where the issue is like we just got the leader. We just got the unified voice that's telling them what to do, how to do it, and where to do it. I
Hmm.
think breaking them up immediately after getting the leader and then kind of putting half that group in a flux of like, so do we still all answer to this guy or are we in a civil war now kind of a thing? It doesn't make sense to me personally.
Yeah, it piles on like too many storylines or onto your already like big unveiled storyline. Like you spend months teasing to who's going to be the leader, and you finally reveal the leader. And instead of doing anything with it, you're now stacking storyline, type of multi-brand storyline, and it's just going to get messy. But speaking of the leader, making Ali that leader is a very interesting choice to say the least. And I'm sort of conflicted because on one hand, Ali's been probably the most natural babyface WWE's had in maybe the last 5 years. Just a naturally good dude in real life and in storyline, and it's hard not to root for him. But on the other hand, we said the exact same thing about Bailey, and she went from being the most natural babyface to one of the most entertaining heels WWE's had in a very long time. So if Ali can make it work, it's going to do flying colors, I think.
Hmm.
And best of all, as long as it just puts him in the main event slot at least, that's definitely not a bad thing for him because for every reason WWE doesn't know what to do with natural baby faces, and I think we've talked about this before too. Like their knee jerk reaction is, oh, we don't know what to do with them. Let's turn him a heel. But if it works, if he can get the character over and he's in a position where he's actually successful because he's been a great babyface for like 5 years, but they've done nothing with him in that 5 years, save for a cruiserweight title match at WrestleMania and like a 205 Live push and like a minor SmackDown push that didn't really go anywhere. But if they could really go all in on Ali now as a heel, then he could. I feel like he's going to show a lot of people just what he's worth and why they should have been pushing him for the last 5 years, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does, and I agree to a point. I think WWE, to give credit where credit is due, is really good at making people hateable. I mean, no one would have thought that we all would have been booing uh, Daniel Bryan at his first WrestleMania back in the ring. And then they put Kofi Kingston opposite of him and gave him a title shot. And we all hated Daniel Bryan. And we hated him with glee on our faces. No one thought we could hate Bayley, whose entire gimmick was, I'm so happy to be here. Let me give you a hug. And we hated Bayley. We think Bayley's got some strong points, but we hated Bayley. And I think that's the really interesting thing about the Retribution storyline is they're not wrong. Like the issues they have with the company are not anything that like any rational wrestling fan is like, oh, this seems a little far-fetched, guys. It's really similar. It's a very, how do I put this? It's Black Panther syndrome to me, where for the first 2/3 of the movie of Black Panther, you're sitting there looking at Killmonger like, he's got a point though. He's not wrong. Like he's killing people, and that's messed up. No doubt that's messed up. But is he wrong? Like they could have helped a lot of people. They could have kept a lot of people safe, but they were just doing their own little thing. And then obviously in the third act, he makes that change, and you're like, oh no, this guy's evil. He needs to go now. So we're still very much in like Act 1, Act 2 Retribution, where they make sense. They weren't given the proper chances in NXT. NXT up until this year was still paid like indie rates compared to a lot of guys getting paid like $1 million, like Rhino and Heath Slater to go sit in catering every week. They're, at a larger scale, they're all independent contractors, so they're not given health care. They're all, continuing with like real world stuff. They're all at the beck and call of what Vince thinks is going to make him money, let alone them money, especially with like recent news that like what they make on Twitch, if they choose to use Twitch, now counts against their bottom line of money that doesn't have to get paid out by the end of the year on their contracts by by WWE as a whole. So they're all making really salient points of like, no, the system's jacked up. The system's corrupt. We're just here to shine a light on the fact that the system's corrupt by operating within the lines of the system and showing you that by virtue of us beating you down and then nothing happening to us because, oh, we're contracted superstars, you can't touch us, da-da-da-da-da, the system's jacked up. It makes a lot of sense. We're still early enough in that it's allowed to make a lot of sense. Now, what I'm interested in is where they're going to make that shift and whether it's with Ali or it's with one of the NXT guys who decides that he's got a better way of doing this, and then they end up ousting Ali, where that shift is going to come and what that shift is going to be that makes us go, oh no, we hate these guys. We just want to watch someone beat them down, and that's what I'm really excited for. That's kind of that's the best part of wrestling to me is seeing these guys get built up, seeing a faction get built up in the way of like the NWO or the Bullet Club and become these like well-loved darlings, and then the invasion happens or the Bullet Club Civil War happens, and then all of a sudden we hate them. We don't know why we hate them, but we hate them. And that's where I'm really excited to see this go.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think you're onto something there. And me not seeing what Retribution's really been doing, and really I didn't know they introduced all those factors. I know you mentioned contracts before, but I didn't know they mentioned like all those factors into why they're doing what they're doing, and it makes me even more interested to see what they're doing. And like you said, like if it makes sense, then that makes a really compelling villain. I think those are the best villains in anime and wrestling movies. The ones who you look at and you agree with to a point, they make sense to a point. Like when you look at Magneto's motivations in X-Men, or even sticking to Black Panther, Killmonger, his motivations make sense in another light if the story was shifted a little more in his favor. You can see where he's coming from, but the way he's going about it is like, oh, this guy's a problem. He's gotta go. And go into wrestling, I always saw Macho Man Randy Savage when he was feuding with Hulk Hogan over the whole Miss Elizabeth thing. That's one of the best villains in wrestling because when you look at things from his perspective, it's very much like, okay, it's God point. Hulk Hogan, he was getting a little handsy with Miss Elizabeth. It's a little sketch. Like
Mm-hmm.
Hulk Hogan's trying to be earnest about it, but it does look sketch enough to say, okay, Savage has a point. It's when he starts like laying people out and like hitting people from behind and just going absolutely bananas on anybody like a jealous husband. It's like, okay, this guy's a problem now. That's a great villain when you could see it from their perspective. And I'm interested to see how Retribution makes that shift, like you said, where you see where they're coming from, but where's the point where they go too far and you're just buying time to see someone take them out?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's one of those things that it's the kind of stuff that made me fall in love with wrestling. Well, the first time I fell in love with wrestling, and I'm so excited to see that there is still that capacity in the WWE to say, no, we're telling a story, and you're just going to have to get on for the ride. And it could all blow up in a week or two, and we could just be right back here, just belly aching about how stupid Retribution is and how they had something so cool. But for now, I'm excited, and I choose to go on with that. All right. So jumping over to NXT, there's really only one thing that we need to talk about, and it is not ideal. So Ridge Holland, the guy that we talked about having, Adam Cole's limp body at NXT TakeOver 31, is in a tag match. I'm not sure who his partner was, but it's against the Britam Brawlers. Uh, he is outside the ring at one point, and Oni Lorcan dives through the ring. Ridge catches him, is a bit off balance when he catches him, and kind of drops his right foot behind him to like stabilize himself. But the momentum of Oni pulls him like over on top of himself, and his right leg gets trapped underneath his back. And on NXT, like if you go find the clip, I don't recommend you do because it's making my skin crawl just talk about it. You hear this just loud, like piercing scream, and you're not sure what it is because they immediately cut away, but it becomes very clear very quickly that it was Ridge just shrieking in pain. There's a bit of a break in obviously a bit of a break in the action. X's are getting thrown up everywhere, and we see him get like lifted out of the arena on a stretcher, his legs all like braced up, he's in pain, he's given the double thumbs up as he's being like lifted, like stretchered out. There's been no official word as of recording about the injury from WWE. There was a very short tweet that went out shortly after the episode aired just saying, WWE a speedy recovery to Ridge Holland. This sucks, man. I mean, he's right in a main spot on TakeOver 31. He's the last image you see before the show goes off air, and he just destroys his leg in a freak accident where his foot was in the wrong place, he wasn't balanced properly, and there's no telling how long he's going to be out now.
That's such a bummer, man. Like those are the injuries you really don't want to see. Like obviously you don't want to see anybody get injured,
Mm-hmm.
but for a guy who hasn't been used virtually at all in the last 2, 3 years, he's been in NXT, and now he basically gets, you can call it the push of a lifetime, taking out the longest reigning NXT champion, tease for a feud with Undisputed Era as a whole, and the first NXT after that takeover, he tears up his leg. Like that's, I just feel for the guy. That's, you cannot pick worse timing in situations like that. So I just hope he gets a speedy recovery, not even just for the sake of the storyline, but just for the sake of his health.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we hope for a speedy recovery for Ridge. Obviously, he's a very talented guy in the ring, but beyond that, he's like 27 years old. There's no career around that's worth like hobbling yourself for the rest of time. So, ideally he heals, he gets to come back, but at the end of the day, as long as he can walk normally, like if this is the last we see of him in NXT or in a wrestling ring at all, at least we'll get to see him, go out with the idea of a push. So jumping over to AEW on that super happy note, This week's AEW was the 30-year anniversary of Chris Jericho's in-ring debut. So he's been an active wrestler for 30 years, which is crazy to think about. The entire show is peppered in with like guest video spots from just insane names. Slash did a video, Kevin Smith did a video, Tanahashi did a video, all kinds of people did videos for his 30-year anniversary. It was super cool. The show itself opened up with Will Hobbs making his in-ring debut against Brian Cage. He loses, but just barely. This was a really, really good match. Hobbs immediately showed that he has like big hoss energy. Like he can look like Brian Cage in the eye and you believe that Brian Cage should be a little fearful that like there is a very clear path where Brian Cage could lose this match. Taz immediately gets on the mic following the match and puts over Hobbs huge, saying that it was impressive. He lost, but he didn't lose by much, and offers him a place with Team Taz. Says that he's basically got two options. He can join Team Taz and become the main event guy that he should be, or he can not join Team Taz and they'll beat the shit out of him. Around the time that he says he's going to beat the shit out of him if he doesn't join, Darby Allin's music hits. Darby and oh goodness, Ricky Starks have been feuding for the last couple of weeks. So Darby comes down to ringside. He's got his skateboard. He kind of backs all three of them out of the ring, and they make their escape. Will Hobbs is immediately a main event guy. Immediately. And I'm so happy for the dude. He's been putting in work on Dark for like 6 weeks, and he got his shot, and he is absolutely doing everything with every opportunity they're handing him. Hobbs is huge. He's got a great look. He's got a great move set apparently as well. And it's just I am really excited. The thing that AEW does well, that NXT used to do well, is they're not afraid of giving young guys the platform to make or break their careers. I mean, you had Private Party pinning the Young Bucks clean in the first round of the tag team tournament. You've now got Will Hobbs going the distance with Brian Cage. You've got Orange Cassidy, who by no means is a young guy or new in the business, but making his entire career with a program against Chris Jericho. And then further on with Chris Jericho, you've got Sugar Dunkerton, an independent wrestler who got offered an AEW contract off of a match with Chris Jericho. Of course, he later turned that down because he prefers to stay independent. But still, I mean, the contract offers and just the way that AEW is kind of getting out of their own way and using their names as launching points for other guys' careers is really, really cool.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And like, it seems like they're putting a whole lot of stock in Will Hobbs. I feel bad that I've never actually seen the guy wrestle, but like, I definitely take your word for it that he's great. But like, seeing how much stock they're putting into him so fast, like you said, if he was on AEW Dark 6 weeks ago, and now he's being paired with the AEW champion, he's being put over and attempted to be recruited by Taz of all people. He's now being paired with Darby Allin, who I might be wrong when I say this, but I feel like he might have been Chris Jericho's first title defense for the world title, and technically the first AEW World Championship match ever. So put all that together in just a short span, like this, they're priming this guy to be the next big thing, and I'm excited to see and hear how he blossoms in the coming weeks, and just really the next coming years, because it seems like he could be a staple of the main event sooner than we think.
Yeah, so I think what you're thinking of is that Darby Allin and Cody Rhodes went to a time limit draw in the first ever episode of Dynamite on TV. So like the first match, the first episode, Cody, who was this huge name and is still is, but obviously had a whole lot of weight with AEW, with it being his baby, comes in and just you know barely escapes with his life against Darby Allin and kind of immediately established him as a big guy to keep an eye on. That's what I think you're talking about, because I don't think that Jericho's first title defense was against Darby, but I can double check that while I get your opinion on this. So Cody Rhodes and Mr. Brody are in a dog collar match for the TNT championship. Super cool, like early 80s, like NWA retro feel. crazy cool match, really, really good. It made me sad that Dusty wasn't around because I swear he would have loved to have been on the apron for this, or honestly to be in it. This was just, it was such a good match. It was like 22 minutes long, but it didn't feel that long. Like it went almost 3 segments on TV. It felt so fast paced and so well done. And the chemistry with these guys who never really worked with each other in WWE, because by the time Brody Lee was up on the main roster, Cody was off in Japan doing his own thing. So the fact that these guys have this level of chemistry this quickly is really, really cool to me. What do you think about that match?
Was this a title match? Is Brody still the champion, or am I thinking of someone else?
Oh, I completely forgot to mention that. No, he's not the champion anymore. Cody beat him for the championship with
Okay,
this match.
okay,
So
with this
Cody,
match.
yeah, Cody
Huh.
won the dog collar match to become the only and first ever two-time TNT champion.
Okay, kind of conflicted about that. On one hand, I feel like Brody might have just got that title. He might have had it longer than I really thought, but it seems like he's only had for a short while. But on the other hand, as much as it would have been cool to see Brody just have a monster reign, longer monster reign than that, I feel like I did say a couple episodes ago when you told me about Cody returning with the black hair that like if you're gonna do a drastic transformation for Cody Rhodes like this, not just with the color, but if that's symbolic of him changing as a character personality wise, then you have to have him win the belt back basically to establish that change. And in that regard, maybe this is a good decision, but at the same time, it feels so quick for Brody to lose that title so fast.
Yeah, I was in the same kind of boat with you, where if the match had been anything less than incredible, I'd have been really annoyed that they put the title back on Cody. It feels like Cody was in a position where to progress the storyline, he had to say he wasn't going to challenge for the world title anymore and went ahead and did it. And then when they realized that they were going to have to roll with that story, they created the TNT title to become the Cody title. And, I don't know. It's weird. It's done well, the match, so that like takes away a lot of the issues I have with it. It's just a moment of meh, because like I don't know, I hate Cody as a champion. I hated Cody as a champion in WWE. I hated Cody as a champion in Ring of Honor and New Japan. He doesn't feel like enough of a fleshed out character to also have that title belt. He is so much more entertaining when he's fighting from underneath and chasing something. So hopefully this kind of returns Cody's like open challenge and we start seeing more indie stars get promoted on Dynamite. And also, hopefully, one of them immediately takes the title off of him, and then we don't see a Cody reign for another year.
I
As
agree.
for that Chris Jericho title defense, I don't see that his first defense was against uh, Darby Allin. It looks like his first defense was a rematch against Hangman Page, but I might be wrong about that.
Okay, I might have imagined that match complete. Did he never wrestle Darby Allin for a title?
He might have given Darby a title like chance, but I don't think it was. But it wasn't the first.
Okay, I imagine that. That's just gonna be something I cut out like nothing happened. But
Fair enough.
on to Cody Rhodes. I agree with you to a point. Like I do agree that he is better as that scrappy underdog challenger who's fighting, scratching, and clawing for a championship. He's better.
Mhm.
He's a better challenger than a champion, but I wouldn't say he's a bad champion to a fault. I think like when he had the TNT championship, it was interesting, not so much because he had towel, but because of what he did with the towel, like giving an opportunity to all these random indie guys on the indie scene, and just made you want to see more of him, not so much to see more of Cody, but to see which independent wrestler will come out next. Will it be an NWA guy like Ricky Starks? Will it be a veteran like Eddie Kingston? Would it be Warhorse? And like you had so many options there. It was just exciting every week. But you not I don't remember a lot of people necessarily caring for Cody. I do, however, remember him in New Japan having what I thought at least was a really good US championship reign. Just because he was a heel in that reign and like he had this pompous air to him as a champion where like he really let his privilege fly basically as a character at least. Just basically this this unapologetic cockiness about having a championship and how he would do whatever it takes to get it. He'd even have his wife fake an injury for him to get that championship. So he'd cheat to win. He'd use his privilege as a family. I don't know what you call it. Wrestling royalty, I guess. Where
Hmm.
wrestling royalty has more than one family, or whatever his theme music says. I feel like I butchered
Wrestling
that.
has more than one royal family.
That's it. I can tell you made the music for for him, wrote the lyrics, but
Mhm.
like I feel like if he goes into that mode as a champion, this could be a very different, very interesting reign from his first, which even if it's not necessarily the pompousness, I think that we are going to get a different Cody for his championship just because the black hair again implies a whole new character change, which I'm assuming that might have been showcased in Dark Hollow match, something more aggressive, I'm thinking, at the very
Mhm.
least.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, no, both these guys were busted open immediately. I would argue that a lot of Cody's initial run with the TNT title, especially when he started bringing in, was that pompous like guy because he would just like in his match against Warhorse, who is inarguably the most dominant independent wrestler right now. He's got the longest independent wrestling title reign of all time. He just drops and starts doing push-ups. Like there's not any more pompous you can be in that. I just think that the way AEW is kind of established and the way that the characters are moving now, you can't turn all of the elite heel while also having all of the elite be independent of one another because you've got the young bucks running around super kicking people. You've got Kenny Omega making snide comments about Adam Page. You've got Adam Page's like rampant alcoholism, and now you've got like pompous Cody. So it's one of those things where if you really want to break up the elite and let these guys stand on their own, you can't turn them all heel at the same time, in my mind.
I agree with you there just because like their characters seem to be shifting in such a drastic way. Like it's one thing to have them all make that drastic leap at the same time. It's a whole another for them to all be doing this drastic change and no one's acknowledging each other really. Like that's for them to be such a such a tight knit group as the elite for so long, and then when they're doing completely different drastic heel actions, no one's really checking each other, saying like, "Hey, why are you super kicking people? Hey, why do you dye your hair?" It's like suddenly nobody cares about each other, and that just strikes me as really odd.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so real quick, and you already said you were going to cut it, so I'm gonna hold you to that.
Oh no, I'm
Uh
keeping that in. Like
oh,
even me saying I'm cutting it, I'm keeping it.
oh well, this is awkward then because Darby Allin was Chris Jericho's first title defense. The
Oh,
match I was shown that showed that it was a title defense wasn't a title defense. It was just the match for the world title at All Out, and then I finally found the history of world title defenses on Cage Match, based Cage Match, and it was Chris Jericho defeating Darby Allin in a Philadelphia Street Fight on AEW Dynamite number 3. So you were right, and I just went through a really long process of telling you were wrong while also verifying that I was right with wrong information and then finding the right information. So that's great.
to be fair, I think we were both wrong at some point in this episode. Maybe that's the episode title, the wrong episode. But
Man.
hey, we both had our moments.
Yeah. So just real quick, because we are starting to run a little long on time. Cody is, in the ring with his title. He reannounces his open challenge, and says that he will face anyone for the title next week. At this point, Orange Cassidy's music hits. He comes out, does the little like half thumbs up that he does. Cody just kind of looks at him and throws a big thumbs up. So that's been confirmed for next week. That's going to be a really cool match, especially since next week is their 1 year anniversary show. They've officially been on TNT for 1 year. So that's gonna be really cool. What I kind of hope happens is that Cody immediately drops the title to Orange Cassidy and then never challenges for it again. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be really cool because Orange Cassidy has been built up so much over the last couple of weeks with his run-ins with Chris Jericho and everything like that. And I think Orange winning a title on the 1 year anniversary while Chris, who just celebrated 30 years in the business, doesn't really have any spot on the card, will just twist that knife a little bit and just allow him to kind of go a little bit crazier. So we can see like the Painmaker finally show up in AEW, which seems like tailor made for the inner circle. I don't know why they haven't used the Painmaker persona yet, but that's all me.
From the sounds of that, that sounds too perfect to not happen, or at least for me to not want that to happen. So I'm really hoping that happens next week.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think it'll be a squash the way that Brody winning the title from Cody will be. I think it'll be a hard fought match, but it really seems like the kind of situation where Cody would best serve as a transitional champion of being like, I'm a little bit of a smaller guy, so this guy is going to beat me. It's going to be a hard fought match. I'm not going to come out looking any worse for wear, but we're also going to give this guy his first title reign in the company and establish him as someone who's now looking for those top titles very, very fast. So I think that would be really interesting.
I would say that would be even better just because, like, if you want to get over this new, more aggressive Cody Rhodes character, like, have him take all this time off, come back with black hair, more aggressive, act like it's such a big deal, and then as soon as he gets what he wanted back, he loses that drop of a hat to Orange Cassidy of all people. That would be a great way to just twist the knife in that character, and maybe he goes ballistic right after a match and just goes that full heel turn that seems to go towards.
And it'll definitely go to confirm to like wrestling purists that Orange Cassidy is legit because like Cody and Brody, not to go back to that match again, beat the crap out of each other with his dog collar match. Like Cody was spitting blood, Brody was spitting blood. They both had crimson masks at one point. So to watch Orange Cassidy go down with his kind of laissez-faire hands in the pocket style and win the title will just immediately make him like that main event guy. So over on the main event of AEW, we had Serpentico, whichever, and Dr. Luther facing off against Chris Jericho and Jake Hager in main event. This is big because Jericho and Dr. Luther both started their careers against one another in the Mexican scene. The last time Jericho and Dr. Luther faced each other across a ring was in 1996, and they're in the main event. Dr. Luther definitely wears the age a lot more than Jericho does. His spots were a little rough, but it was a good match. Obviously, Hager and Jericho come away with the win. It was a feel-good way to end the episode. Yeah, it was a cool match. It was a good bit of like nostalgia, little throwback. What do you think about that?
Don't have anything just offhand, just kind of want to reiterate just how wild it is to think Jericho's been doing this for 30 years now. That's just kind of wild for me. It doesn't feel that way, especially when you look at the way he goes in the ring, but it's just wild nonetheless.
Yeah. And one last thing about AEW, have you seen on your Twitter feed this kind of conspiracy theory that's broken out into like normal Twitter now that Serpentico is actually David Arquette?
I actually never even heard the name Serpentico until you mentioned it, but
So Serpentico supposed to be this Mexican masked luchador, very clearly a white dude under a mask. People, around the time that the documentary You Can't Kill David Arquette came out, when they saw that he spent like 6 months in Mexico training under a mask and actually performed in a couple of shows under a mask, started throwing out the idea that, they have similar-ish tattoos, and maybe his tattoos have changed since the last time we saw him at that GCW show where he almost died. Maybe it's the same guy, and both of them are kind of playing into it. Like David Arquette is tweeting at Serpentico and being like, hey, man, you were late for dinner and you got me in trouble. And Serpentico changed his name to David Arquette ? For like a week. It's really interesting. If it's not real, which I don't think it is, super fantastic like marketing on the hands of Serpentico. If it is real, real, that's hilarious. And also, if it's not, we better get a like David Arquette Serpentico match on AEW Dark at some point, because that's just screaming to happen at this point.
It's such a ridiculous thing that I hope that they never confirm it. Like just for years on end, they just keep like poking the bear of is this Serpentico? Is this David Arquette? Like it's one of those like weird wrestling secrets that just gets conflicting reports when people
What
talk
I
about it in interviews.
what I honestly kind of, in that same vein, kind of hope happens is that Serpentico spends like his entire career with AEW, becomes like this well respected and loved, like maybe even not even champion, but just like good set of hands for dark and like lower card matches, ends up going into the Hall of Fame, goes into the Hall of Fame with his mask, and then like a couple years later, David Arquette shows up and goes into the Hall of Fame. But David Arquette never wrestled a match on AEW, or even better, you have Serpentico, doing all this stuff, does his entire career, and then, the AEW Hall of Fame, which has not been confirmed as a thing, but eventually will become a thing, comes around, and David Arquette's inducted into the AEW Hall of Fame for his, contributions to the wrestling business, but there's no mention of Serpentico at all. It's just, oh no, David Arquette's just, he was around in the 90s. He did a lot of great stuff. He really put his years in. He gave a lot back to the business. We like him. He's in the Hall of Fame. No mention of Serpentico, and Serpentico's never seen again on AEW programming, but it's never brought up that they're the same guy. It's just one of those things. You're like, yeah, screw it.
Perfect. I hope the AEW people are watching this and like just run with that idea.
Oh, absolutely. So there's one match we want to talk about from Impact Wrestling, and that is Jordan Grace versus Rohit Raju for the X Division title. Rohit's had his Can You Beat Rohit challenge, which is just an open challenge. Jordan Grace does beat him. She pins him in the middle of the ring, is starting to celebrate like she's the new X Division title holder, and then Rohit kind of grabs the mic and goes, "No, no, 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 no. The challenge was Can You Beat Rohit? The challenge was never can you be the X Division title holder," and like walks away, says it was never for the title, and leaves, at which point he's kind of confronted backstage by the on-screen like boss of Impact Wrestling, Scott D'Amore, and told that he's been really impressed with the way Rohit has carried himself for the last couple of weeks, and because he's so impressed, he's getting a spot at Bound for Glory, and it's going to be a 6-man scramble with Rohit, Jordan Grace, TJP, Trey Miguel, and Chris Bay. So everyone that he's run afoul of while holding this X Division title are going to be in the ring with him, and it's going to be crazy. I think this is where they put the title on Jordan, honestly, and kind of give her that same like feel and look that they gave to Tessa Blanchard before Tessa was Tessa, and kind of just give her the X Division title, get fans used to seeing her in there with the guys, and then eventually transition her over to a world title reign. And I really think that'd be a really interesting way to do it, especially if the person that she beats for that world title eventually is the current title holder, Eric Young. I think that's a really interesting way to kind of swan song Eric Young's career all the way through, from starting with Impact, where the women's division was taken seriously, but not that seriously, all the way to a woman eventually beating him for the world title. I think that'd be a really interesting way to do that. What about you, man?
It would be great. So I got like 2 or 3 things. One, that's actually really smart booking, like to put him in a match with everybody he screwed over and then just build towards that. That's great booking. Two, I need to pull up some like Rohit Raju stuff because he was in Desi Hit Squad, right?
Yeah, and then when the pandemic happened, I believe his brother and their trainer ended up going back to India to quarantine, and he stayed in the States, which is why he's kind of doing his own thing right now. He may have
Okay.
also been injured, his brother, so I don't know for sure, but he's the only one from Desi Hit Squad that's appeared on TV in months at this point.
Okay. Because like Desi Hit Squad was never really like on my radar that much because every time I would tune into Impact and see them, they always lost matches. I can't name
Hmm.
you a single match where they won a match. So for him to surprisingly be the breakout star of that group and have what sounds like a really great heel run, both as just an entertaining heel, just a hilarious heel that you just kind of love to hate a little bit. I need to see more of that. 3, I'm 100% behind putting the X Division title on Jordan Grace for multitude of reasons. One being she's Jordan Grace, one of the best
Hmm.
wrestlers on the planet. Might as well just put a towel on her. 2, I feel like Impact needs to, how I put this, they kind of need to make up for the Tessa thing. Like, because you've got a lot of great women on that roster, and not knowing all the women offhand, Jordan Grace is definitely like one of the better women on that roster, or heck, one of the better wrestlers in general when you look at the whole Impact roster. And then you look at Tessa Blanchard, who was the first ever Impact Wrestling champion and the first ever woman to hold a predominantly male title. And then she turns out to be this backstage bully and verbal abuser and alleged racist. And I say alleged because that's the only thing she's ever denied of doing. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
sure, if you say you didn't say the N word, sure, but you still got a lot of other stuff to answer for. But we'll need to go on a Tessa Blanchard rant. I wrote about it at length before. We're already, wow, time went by fast. 145 minutes into the podcast, so I don't need to go like 5-10 minutes deep on Tessa Blanchard. What I will say is that Impact being bold enough to say, hey, this is one of our women, regardless of being man or woman, she's just one of the flat out best women on the roster.
Hmm.
So we're going to put one of our top belts on her. That's in many respects a bold move just because I don't see top promotions like WWE doing that. I don't see AEW trying to do that. So I don't want them to feel discouraged from doing it again just because it didn't really work out with Tessa. Definitely keep pushing the women in their roster and just do it to the point where it just feels like the norm. You don't have just one or two women in Knockouts division fighting for these titles. You have keep doing it to a point that we eventually see all the women wrestling for pretty much every belt, and every belt is just basically like an intergender belt. So I'm all for them just starting that road with someone as good as Jordan Grace. Her just unproblematic as Jordan Grace outside of the ring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jordan Grace definitely feels like the wrestler who has outgrown the knockouts division the most, in that like she has had a couple of recent losses to Tennille Dashwood, but they haven't hurt her in any way. Like Tennille absolutely is leveled up by beating Jordan Grace, but Jordan Grace loses nothing. In the same way that Taya lost nothing by losing her title to Jordan Grace, Jordan now loses nothing by dropping a match here or there to Tennille because we know she can be so incredible. So I think the only logical way to keep her as white hot as she is right now, other than bringing in a slew of new talent, which they are currently doing, is to kind of move her over into that predominantly male dominated world title, X division title world. Or even, there's been a lot of discussion on if Impact's going to bring back the women's world tag team titles. Don't bring them back. Just have Havoc and Nevaeh challenge Motor City Machine Guns for their title at Bound for Glory. We've had this story where they're trying to figure out who's deserving of a title defense. You've had Havoc and Nevaeh running through their kind of ramshod title tag division over on the women's side of the roster. They're both incredible workers. Just have that match. I would pay to watch that match.
I can't speak to that matchup because I don't know who Nevaeh is, but Havoc is phenomenal in the ring, so
Hmm.
I'm all for her doing the tag team thing. And again, make this norm. Like, make this have women wrestling for all the titles on the show. So if you get three women wrestling for predominantly male titles on the pay per view,
Hmm.
that'd be a dope thing, especially for your WrestleMania show. That's gonna put some butts in seats, virtual seats.
Absolutely.
I don't know
Yeah.
if they got fans right now.
I think they're in Florida, so they might be open to fans, but I don't know. They're either filming in Florida or Vegas. I think it might be Vegas. But either way. So over to Ring of Honor, their pure tournament is like well into the swing of things. We're into the second round, kind of figuring out who the last couple of people are going to be. We had Tracy Williams facing off against Russ Taylor. This was a really good match. It went like almost 15 minutes, with Tracy Williams submitting Rust. It was a little weird because by the end, Tracy just like starts to put him in the submission hold, and I think Russ kind of realized they were over time and immediately taps out without even like being in the hold for very long. So that was a little strange. And then we had PJ Black, who's been rocking up everywhere lately, pinning Tony Deppen to move into the next round. And then next week we've got Jonathan Gresham versus Matt Sydal and Jay Lethal versus David Finlay. So it's we're getting down to the nitty gritty. We're about to be into that last like set of matches, and this has been a really solid couple of weeks of TV. Really great matches. I don't know. It's been a really fun way to kind of reintroduce Ring of Honor.
Okay, I'm glad they're doing a really good job with tournament. I do have one question based on something I saw on Twitter. Is EC3 in Ring of Honor? Because I saw like a promo thing where like they've got his logo. I don't know if that's.
So
I looked like it was official from the account, from the Ring of Honor account. I mean,
yes and no. So EC3 was confirmed to be at these tapings. As of yet, he has not shown up on TV, and he is still actively on Impact's weekly television. So it's not clear where that overlap is going to occur and when. If EC3 is coming off Impact TV, he will. You're still very much dealing with the Moose and EC3 storyline over on Impact. So it was confirmed he was at the tapings. It was confirmed that he was in the ring at the tapings. They haven't aired any of that yet, so I don't know if that's going to come in the finals or the semifinals, similar to where not Nick Aldis, but oh goodness, what is his name? He was in WWE with his wife, and they got cut like right with that big group of people.
Mike Bennett.
Kanellis, Mike Bennett,
Yeah.
Mike Bennett. Similar to his thing, where like he kind of just showed up in the NWA, and the NWA has that working relationship with Ring of Honor, and obviously Bennett's like biggest set of wins in his career were in Ring of Honor, so he could show up at any time. So it's a bit up in the air on whether or not he's actually showing up, or if he showed up, did the tapings, ended up signing a new deal with Impact, and now they're just not using that footage.
And it wouldn't be the weirdest thing, I guess, if EC3's pulling like double duty, I guess. Especially since like I'm not sure if Ring of Honor has like a TV deal. They're just doing online stuff, right?
No, so Ring of Honor is on Stadium every week. It's like a local like sports station. They were with Access, but then when Impact bought Access, they kicked them and New Japan off of the network. So New Japan went like digital only, and Ring of Honor went over to Stadium.
Okay. So hmm, yeah, I'm not sure like how that would work if you factor in like TV deals and contracts and stuff. If he can be on two platforms at the same time, if they're going to do like a Rick Rude type of thing, like
Yeah.
Nitro and Raw at the same time. But it's an interesting prospect, so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that does it really for the week in wrestling. So we're going to jump over to my indie watch list. Obviously, I watch a lot of wrestling, as you can tell. I also watch a lot of indie wrestling. My recommendation for indie wrestling you should go seek out this week is Uncanny Attractions, Drags and Dropkicks. This is a Oakland-based promotion that kind of melds the theater of pro wrestling with the theater of drag. This is their Halloween show from last year. So you had the Nobodies, who have a very popular wrestling podcast and are all drag performers, doing like a 5 or 10 minute like performance to start off the show, and then you had some really incredible stuff. Like there was a match that featured a woman who I'd never seen work before, named Nurse Ratchet, who did a tightrope spot but in 4-inch heels. So she walks from turnbuckle to turnbuckle to turnbuckle in 4-inch heels, and then does an arm drag off the turnbuckle. I've never seen anything like it before. It was insane, and it had me completely enraptured immediately. This whole promotion, Uncanny Attractions, just kind of takes the camp of like early 90s and late 80s wrestling and turns it up to 11. You're going to go there and be challenged in your beliefs of what real wrestling should be. But I think that what makes it real wrestling is it's going to be like, no, we're wrestling, and you're just going to have to be cool with that and enjoy yourself.
I like the sound. That definitely does sound really insane with the whole 9-inch heel thing. Like that's one of those
No, no,
things I
no.
have to.
It was like a 4-inch heel. It wasn't a 9-inch heel. It was like a 3/4 tightrope walk from turnbuckle, and like 4-inch heels. But still, 4-inch heels, insane.
Yeah, like I couldn't walk in 9-inch heels or 4-inch heels. Like to me, 4 and 9 inch beyond the measurements, that's the same type of inch. It's something I cannot walk in. So that's props to her. What was her name? Miss Ratchet?
Nurse Ratchet.
Nurse Ratchet. Everybody go follow Nurse Ratchet and tweet at her that Lap Scrap said she did a really good job.
Yeah, and her is at where's it hurt. So WHERESITHURT. So she is full on in the Nurse Ratchet gimmick from the, I believe, Stanley Kubrick film, and just going with it.
Oh, so that's why I've heard that before.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Nurse
yeah.
Ratchet from Cuckoo's Nest?
Yes. Yeah, in the same way of like the Sarah Paulson Netflix show, just Nurse Ratchet just in her little nurse's outfit with 3-inch heels, just doing all kinds of crazy crap. It's wild.
So that sounds very dope. I might have checked out myself as well, but that also brings me right into my segment asking, is now a good time to get back into wrestling if you haven't been keeping up recently? Honestly, it's kind of a tough call. Because on one hand, you got really interesting, intriguing stuff like Ali and the stuff they're doing with Bliss and Bray Wyatt, and of course the draft coming up, and or drafts happening right now. This is coming out on a Friday after all, and we're recording on a Friday. Yep, we're now I'm breaking the illusion of podcasting, so we're doing that now. But on the other hand, on the flip side, you've got weird stuff like the Buddy Murphy angle and disappointing stuff like the you got Rich Holland getting injured, and that's disappointing. So wrestling's right now, it sounds like it's a mix of really exciting stuff and really disappointing stuff. So yeah, it's cool. Wrestling is just wrestling, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a bit of a toss up. Like there are really good parts of wrestling right now, and there's some disappointing aspects of wrestling. But I think that is the way it is with any kind of mass media that is enjoyed and produced on this scale, at least. I mean, you're going to have great blockbuster movies every summer, and you're going to have really, really bad ones. It's just a matter of finding the niche that you're comfortable in. If you like guys punching each other in the face with no real camera cuts because they're punching each other in the face, you're going to go over to Japan. If you want a bit more theater, you're going to go, to an indie like Uncanny Attractions. If you want something kind of corporately produced and real streamlined, you're probably going to end up at AEW or WWE. But at the end of the day, it's all wrestling, no matter what Vince McMahon says.
100%. If you want to stick to that whole movie analogy, then I'd say I'd recommend, if you want to decide if now is a good time for you to get back into wrestling, then basically look at the box office, or in this case, the highlights of Sandbar up. If you want something violent, look at the dog collar match. If you want a captivating story that you know is going to hook you for weeks to come, look at the Ali segments for Retribution. So just weigh out the pros and cons of how you think you'll feel about all the good stuff Sam talked about, and then try to ignore and avoid all the bad stuff he talked about.
Yeah, that's how I live my life. Is only thing that's happening is good because the rest of it is right out the side of my head. So thank you all so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam. You need to spell out that comma. So it's Gladen, GLADEN, COMMASAM, and read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com.
And you can find me in way too many places. You can find me at Wham Bam is Jam on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me at the Mental Health Check-In Podcast, where we talk about mental health awareness. You can find me on I was about to say the Labs Graps podcast for no reason at all. You can hear me on starting officially tomorrow or today, because it's Friday, of course. You can hear me on a basketball podcast with Anthony Sewer called Hoop There Is. We're gonna be doing our debut episode as co-host right after the NBA Finals, which I say that LeBron and the Lakers finish it on Friday. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong in this case. But if I'm wrong, eh, eh. And also, I am a judge for the Transstellar Film Festival, the only Michigan-based LGBTQ inclusive film festival that highlights all queer films made by queer filmmakers. And we finally basically made our launch after a year's worth of hard work. We were supposed to do something in the summer at a local theater, but obviously COVID happened and that slowed things down. We're now doing a virtual festival on November 7th through the 8th. So that's officially announced. So you can look at the Transstellar Film Festival official Twitter page for any updates or ticket info if you want to look at all the films online for a reasonable price.
Fantastic. You can also follow the show on Twitter at LapsGraps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time,
We out.
out.